Hello comrades! Today we have a truly unique setup for review. It was developed from scratch in Russia by our engineers. Yes, it's made in China, but its price is indecently low because for 30 kilograms of weight you get a really cool powerhouse with dual mono. Here it is. And the preamplifier. And you know that I always support separate setups. Of course, in an ideal setup, there should be two power amplifiers, one for each channel, or left and right. All of this should be connected via balanced connections to the preamplifier, and the preamplifier should then connect to the DAC, and accordingly to the streamer. Here, this device essentially has everything in one. But let's take a look at them step by step from all sides in terms of design, functionality. We'll look inside, and in the end, we'll even listen to them, and you'll be able to figure out whether they are worth the money or not. But I will say that they definitely are. My first encounter with this setup was at the Hi-Fi High-End show, which I always try to attend. By the way, you can check out my reports. I believe that they are worthy of your attention if you love good and high-quality sound and reliable information, let's say, as truthful as possible, because I always say what I think. Many people like it, many don't, but that's how it is, friends. So, I entered the Premiere room and saw their signature stand. And do you know what immediately caught my eye? At that moment, there was this power amplifier with huge meters. Now I'll turn on its, let's say, display, and it will glow with an absolutely stunning, ambient light. And I said, how much does this thing cost? Timur was standing there, one of the, let's say, gurus of this company Premiere. And he tells me, Rodion, we will be selling it for less than 150,000 rubles. I said, really? This thing for 150,000 rubles? I didn't know its specifications at the time, but just by looking, I understood that it would be over 200 watts at 8 ohms. It was clear that it was dual mono, as the inputs for the speakers and the balance controls were separated at the back. A genuine 260 watts at 8 ohms, and it costs, friends, 148,000 rubles. Do you understand? With a 3-year warranty. Brand new, with dual mono and a good appearance. We will soon take a look inside and see how everything is arranged, and it's arranged quite well. Not perfect, friends. I always tell it like it is, but really cool. So, well, this is a real killer. And Premiere also made this preamplifier for it, friends. Less than 100,000 rubles. Support for all services. Tidal, Qobuz, Spotify, which nobody needs. Here in Russia, Bluetooth, HDMI, ARC, friends. Balanced inputs and outputs. And all this costs less than 100,000 rubles. In the end, this whole setup that you assemble and place, well, it's generally better not to do it this way because the amplifier is quite hot. It's better to place them in a row. And you get a truly serious and powerful musical setup for less than 300,000 rubles. But let's go through everything step by step. Let's look at what it offers us from a design perspective. I'm standing up. I'll be honest, I don't like all sorts of little arrows, frills, and lights on the front panel. That's exactly why, by the way, Accuface removes the arrows in their top devices, and they have a diode scale instead. So, on my Bristons, there's nothing at all. There's just a metal front panel and one light. All of this causes interference, but there are people who love watching those arrows move back and forth. I even got down on my knees for you, comrades, to show everything as clearly as possible without embellishment. So, let's turn it on. Let's press this button. By the way, it's metal. And it stylishly glows with a red light, see? And now their signature, you could say brand color with a slight bluish tint. Well, there's nothing special here, so to speak. You can change the color. Ta-da! How about this? Green. This is actually my least favorite, but it looks cool, kind of like audio research. And again, white. I think this solution is the most interesting. So what do we have here on the front facade? Accordingly, we can change the color, we can even turn it off completely, and in general, the arrows will not be visible, and switch between RCA and the XLR, you hear the relay clicking. There is also the option to switch to speaker A, speaker B, and accordingly to disable these arrows so that they don't work at all. Notice what scale they have, accordingly from -50 to +5, and accordingly at the bottom we have watts. At the peak, it should generally deliver 600, like this. On the left, accordingly, and on the right of this arrow panel. And it says, True Sound Class AB Dual Monopower Amplifier M1, and the new branded Premiere logo. Well, with this practically, oh no, let's see what's at the back, friends. Look, a large power button, exactly as it should be. The power supply is in the middle, which is very correct, because often in such amplifiers, it is shifted to the left or right. And accordingly, the selection of speaker A, speaker B, overall, this is not such an important function. For example, again, in the same Bristons, there is only one pair. And accordingly, we have the XLR, unfortunately not a Nutric connector, but the RCA is gold-plated. That's basically everything. What is the downside of this amplifier? For now, they are assembled in China. Because of this, of course, the price is significantly lower. If they start assembling in Russia, I think it would roughly double the price. So, it cannot be combined with a second identical unit, meaning you can't switch it to mono. There is no such possibility. If they could be expanded and scaled like that, it would be cool. Just imagine creating a home theater with these things. Well, yeah, why not? Take them, for example, them one per channel, and assemble a 514 system. That means there should be a total of 11 units. Imagine, you have a beautiful rack, like I know my good friend Anton from Black Room, he installs Alcon power amplifiers in his home theaters. They operate in Class D, weigh, well, just a few kilos, around 7 kilograms. And they sound great, no doubt about it, but for me, an amplifier costing $1 million that weighs less than 10 kilograms. Well, developers from Premiere, here's a suggestion to create a professional version as well, so they can be integrated into a home theater. This is how an almost ideal, relatively budget-friendly setup should look. However, I still don't recommend setting it up like this, because it heats up. Let's take a look. Here we have a preamplifier, as I mentioned, and at the same time, it's an absolutely versatile and unique device because you can easily connect it to a power amplifier or, for example, to an integrated amplifier. Let's turn it on. Notice, yes, there's also a little red light, just like on the power amplifier. And after turning it on, we have this gentle blue light here. Look, you can insert a flash drive and headphones accordingly. This is our immediate switching. There's a small display here. Of course, there was no point in putting needles here. And note that you can connect a phono preamp, CD, tape, aux. Coaxial input, optical, HDMI ARC is present here. And that's great. Because you can easily integrate this setup into your where? Into a home theater. You can use it in a home theater, but you can also just place it under your TV, run HDMI ARC from your TV or projector, connect it, and enjoy not only music, but also movies. And you can even watch the news on Channel 1 with all the nuances, so to speak, and picking out every detail of the announcer. By the way, this is not a joke. It's really true because the device is of very high quality, both the first and the second. USB-A, USB-B streaming. So what can be said about streaming? I use the Vim app. The guys from Premiere recommend audio system, but I disagree with them here because the Vim app works just wonderfully. On these devices so far, it's of higher quality. I linked Qobuz there, I linked Tidal there, and I have internet radio set up, which, by the way, on my home receiver Denon AVC 110, uses the Denon house system of the same name, which is also in the Marantz, and it has now been updated. In principle, it looks good, but still, the VimeU app here, well, you can work with it and control these devices. So it is much better. Moreover, in Denon, in Marantz, yes, all Russian internet radio stations are completely blocked. For example, I listen to Radio Monte Carlo 102.1 and 105, I think, and 9. Monte Carlo from St. Petersburg. By the way, I recently visited the northern capital. A magnificent city, just a little, as it seemed to me, unkempt. But let's not dwell on the sad. So there you go. And there are nuances. You see, you won't be able to listen to our radio stations on your Denon or Marantz. Here, you can manually set them up, friends. Therefore, this is, you could say, a way to bypass all the sanctions. Yeah, and accordingly, Bluetooth is absolutely useless. The most useless and the worst, let's say, could be streaming audio transmission, because Bluetooth is very poorly implemented, not only here, but in almost all devices. And yet, no matter the codec aptX, even LDAC, it will be inferior if you play a song directly, let's say, from this device. That is, you will download the application. Audio system, yes, but you will only use it to control, while all the songs will be directly handled by this device. And the last thing here is the bass adjustment. Accordingly, low frequencies and treble, which is accordingly the high balance. Absolutely, I believe, unnecessary things, because a true hardcore lover of quality audio should, let's say, forget about these adjustments altogether. And again, the master volume. Do you feel it, right? When you can not only adjust the sound, but also accordingly control this device. Or the screen, I repeat, is very small, modest. Well, for this price, I understand that asking for something more is probably not worth it, but it's here, and for that, thank you. We turn and see a simply enormous variety of inputs. Well, again, the proud inscription made by LLC MMS in Russia. That's all great. Kudos to them for that. Look, this is a very important moment, as you can connect the subwoofer separately here. For example, if you don't have a bass machine that, let's say, can connect to a high level, like some real or MJ acoustic, you can easily set up any subwoofer, plug it in here, preferably with a good cable, and get an additional boost in low frequencies. Also, I draw your attention to these switches, which are very interesting in switching between RCA and XLR, and accordingly the phonostage. For analog sound enthusiasts, we have not just MM, but also MC. What else do we have here grounding? Here is the HDMI ARCA. You know, friends, I would like to, yes, well, the appetite comes during a meal. Still, if they had integrated not just one HDMI, but several, that would have been great. What is this for? Look. Where does our projector go? It goes in here, right? So, to have a video card, well, to make with a mini receiver, and accordingly, so that you could also insert a source here. How do you like that, right? It would be cool, but unfortunately, no. We only connect HDMI ARC here. And if in our set-top box, the sound cannot be transmitted, like for example in NVIDIA Shield, please write in the comments, how can you connect a projector and NVIDIA Shield to this or device so that there is both image and accordingly sound? I'm interested to hear. Moving on. Optical, coaxial, accordingly, 3 analog inputs are more than enough. I don't see the point in having 5 or 6. Accordingly, XLR is our input. And accordingly, output, as I mentioned, you can easily connect it to, accordingly, an integrated amplifier. USB audio. I like the sound here. Yes. Everything is good. And accordingly, Ethernet. I didn't connect it, I'll say right away, because everything is immediately through Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth module. Overall, everything is clear, good, decent. You see, accidentally touched it, switched it, and then we'll connect it like this. Yes, blindly. And there's no sound. Why? Because I accidentally touched the toggle switch there. Let's open it up and see what's inside. Let's do it. Opening it up. Let's see. The cover is, of course, flimsy, but what can you do? We're not going to drink or eat from it. Listen, it's heavy. There. Apparently, something needs to be unclipped. Why is everything so rigid? Huh? It won't budge. It says, listen, I won't show you what's inside. I need help from the audience. It's the first time this has happened, you know? This is what the invisible hand of Russian developers means. They make it so that it's just impossible, really. Well, let's start with something small, all right? With just a light wave of the hand, you can see that this device, for its 90,000 rubles, is made more than decently. Friends, don't get me wrong. I'm not doing this kind of advertising. But honestly, I have to say there's absolutely nothing to criticize here. A normal toroidal transformer, friends, similar to the one in my Bristol DAC, which costs 10 times more. The complete absence of loops is very good. Here you can see that the board connects to the board again. I've seen something similar in my Bristons, which you probably don't like anymore. So what? Well, I have them, I use them, and I'm not planning to change. What do we see next? A small, most likely, switching power supply unit on this little board. What else do we have here? The main board, capacitors. We don't see any large cans here, but there are small ones scattered around. 3 small ones at 3,300 microfarads each. In total, we get practically, accordingly, 9,900. What else do we have here? M-Logic, friends, the board. Here it is, the XMOS chips. And what else? Yes, basically nothing, friends. Look, enjoy, maybe you'll sketch the schematic, and then assemble something similar yourself. I have no complaints about this thing. By the way, friends, this thing also supports AirPlay 2. If you have an iPhone, you can connect to it without any problems. As for our DAC, it has an ES9018 K2M Sabre. I don't like them. If Premiere had installed an Asahi Kasei semiconductor, that would have been just superb. But the so-called Sabre, as they are commonly referred to, well, it's a good DAC. But I don't quite like its sound. The 32-bit hyperstream architecture can process data accordingly, PCM up to 32 bits with a frequency up to 384 kilohertz. And of course, it also supports DSD. That's how it is, friends. What else can be said about it? Well, it's a good, decent device. Again, for this price, I have nothing to criticize here. The total power consumption is up to 30 watts. And the weight, of course, is 6.4 kilograms, which is quite respectable overall. You know, in general, encountering such a mini-tor in devices of this kind is a rarity. Therefore, I tip my hat to Premiere. I gave in after all. On the second try, but I got it. Opened. Let's watch. Do you know how much it consumes at peak? Almost a kilowatt. To be precise, 900 watts. And why? Yes, because there are 2 large motori here. Look at them. How cool this thing is made inside. Again, this layout somehow reminded me of the Cambridge Edge series, which cost an astronomical amount. You remember that Cambridge once decided to move into the high-end market. I used to relatively like the Cambridges at one time, but I'll quickly tell you a story. I decided to buy the 851 integrated amplifier and replace my then Pro Sound A23 without the Plus, which was connected to the Oppo 105, and the Oppo was used as a preamplifier. And when I came home with the new Cambridge, I connected it and thought, finally, I can get rid of this Pro Sound, which I was just tired of, as it had been with me for several years. So I connected, listen, and the Cambridge was just such It was just incredibly disappointing. I let it warm up, friends. I let it warm up for a long time. Well, yes, it started to sound a little better, but still it didn't come close to the Pro sound at all. So Cambridge also had this premium Edge series, which many praised at the start. I listened to it back then and immediately said, guys, well, it's absolutely not worth the money. Although inside it was also made really well. But again, the price-quality ratio is one of the main parameters. So it was just not good there. Nevertheless, they made a very serious, expensive, luxurious device that, well, at least in Russia, did not catch on with the masses. Here we have a similar system in terms of design, yet this thing costs much less. Pay attention to the radiators. See, they have a wave-like pattern. That's expensive. Why is this done? To increase the surface area. You see, I've already got thermal paste on myself. The surface area for heat dissipation is larger. Even in my amplifiers, why you know which brand they are, they don't have this kind of comb-like pattern. It's just, let's say, a smooth surface. Look, the radiator is large here. Radiators, there are 1, 2, 3. 3 on the right and accordingly on the left, and capacitors. You know, the circuitry is well made, but again, I repeat, it's that Japanese style where everything is cooked in one pot. I am a proponent of the American or European, well, more of the North American school, where the fins are essentially brought outside. They cool better. The transformer naturally is inside, and the capacitors are placed somewhere in one spot. This cover here, kudos to Premiere, they didn't bother with it, like many others do, even more expensive manufacturers. They just do a little bit here, a little bit there. Premiere simply took it and made the whole thing with these little holes. And on the side, by the way, they could have made it bigger. I don't think the frame would become any less sturdy because of this. Yes, the cover is not outstanding, but overall it doesn't fall apart in your hands. So this type of cooling is sufficient. What's the downside? Well, of course, more dust will get in. And here is this new device. And I've had it for a couple of months, but because as you can see, everything flies in there. Periodically, ideally, you should, well, at least once a year, remove this cover and blow everything out. Let's take a look at how many capacitors we have here. We have, let's say, 4 capacitors per channel here. My eyes are not deceiving me, I believe, and each has a capacity of 8,200. So we have 8,200 multiplied by 8, which gives us 65,600. Did I get that right? Please write in the comments. Is that a lot or a little? You know, friends, of course it's a bit low because for such a powerful, serious device, ideally it should reach up to 100. You know what, friends? Well, considering the price is very low, the most dedicated enthusiasts can take and replace these capacitors with ones of higher capacity. And then you will get, as it seems to me, you know, you can't spoil porridge with butter. Although recent studies suggest that butter is actually very harmful to humans, I continue to eat it. By the way, I'm interested in your opinion again. So 100,000, if they put a total of 100,000 here, that would be cool. Because, well, it would be the next level. Although, what do you think? Would 100, instead of 60,000, significantly increase its price? I think it would considerably. Again, write in the comments. Your opinion is important to me. What else can I say? Notice that the transformers, friends, look, they are branded. That is, these are all Premiere custom audio grade, straight out transformers. It's covered here with this little thing. Usually, no, just a bolt sticks out. What is written on them, on these transformers? They are, of course, made in China. What is the brand, friends? I can't see. It's unclear. It just says red, I think, and that's it. Interesting name. Again, look. See? All the wires are in this kind of additional braiding. That's really cool. Look, here. An additional cover again. What else can I point out here? Well, overall, everything is decent. That is, almost a kilowatt, 2 transformers, pure dual mono. If in the next revision, so to speak, I hope these devices will go mainstream because I will recommend them, I can already say, for this price there are simply no analogs. I would use them for a mid-level stereo system and even a home theater. So, in the next revision, I would certainly recommend placing the capacitors somewhere in this part, and accordingly, placing the radiators with transistors somewhere over here. Well, now I'll quickly talk about the sound. Aren't those little arrows dancing beautifully? You know, like me, probably very few have tested it over time, because indeed, I spent several months in very close interaction with it. And now I'm ready to honestly tell you how it plays. It's nice that despite leaning towards the mass market segment, Premiera dared to take a bold step by creating standalone components in the form of an amplifier and a preamp. While many top brands are, on the contrary, reducing their model range, the Russian brand, Boot, is strengthening its position. Undoubtedly, for complete feng shui, I miss having an exclusively analog preamplifier to which a streamer would fit perfectly. Well, you know, there's the CDE, X1S PRO, and such a combination could be called high-end for the poor. Nevertheless, even these two devices can introduce the listener to a completely different league compared to just the Premiera A3S, which by itself is a killer in the segment up to 150,000 rubles. And within these limits, war competitors simply have no chance. If you come up with something better, please write in the comments. I would be delighted. Moreover, these two devices will simply blow away some pathetic Technics GX70 with its laughable 40 watts at 8 ohms and a power consumption of 63 watts. And that's for 220,000 rubles. I'll say more. I will undoubtedly offer my clients this setup against, for example, the Technics R1000, which costs over 1 million rubles and can provide you with a much lesser user experience. This often happens in our unfair world where you buy a heavily advertised product, but younger competitors are more aggressive and hungry for results. Make it so that you feel offended. The uniqueness of the product also lies in the fact that by multiplying the amplifiers and placing them in a rack tower, preferably with a transparent wall or just on a shelf, you can assemble a top-level home theater. In any case, it will convey explosions, various collisions, shots, and singing. More interestingly than any modern receiver in the world. And that's a fact. You know, I am against assembling a home theater on separate Class D amplifiers. Yes, Class AB is expensive. Yes, it's complicated, but it's high quality, and for that you have to pay. As for music playback, it's truly a versatile workhorse, capable of controlling almost any acoustics, except for my 802 D4. I'm sure our heroes won't handle the KEF Reference 5 either, but weaker models will be revealed without any issues. There's a lot of power, and you can feel it. For the 100th time, I repeat this for people without the necessary experience. High wattage figures over 200 are not needed for a disco, but rather to listen to music as quietly as possible, while still allowing the acoustics to convey the maximum number of nuances. Everything is at its maximum, yet at the minimum. So what performs better in music? Overall, everything plays well. It's a rare case where I can't pinpoint genre-specific preferences. Rock represented by Rammstein from the album Zeit. AC/DC Back in Black. Back in Black. They were performed very well and energetically. I liked Sadie with her latest studio album. Madonna. George Michael with my favorite, Older. Strange? Maybe. It was conveyed, extremely movingly. If you haven't watched my latest video about George yet, I highly recommend it. It has already gained a decent number of views. I confess I recently heard Drake on it and initially turned on the amplifier in Class A, then connected this setup. Moreover, the preamplifier was also Premiera. I'll be honest, I won't point fingers, but this thing performed just magnificently. Drake with his oof, miss low frequencies, was top-notch. Detailed, clear, powerful delivery. Martin Logan's Premiera's bookshelf floor-standing speakers were controlled without a chance. And it's clear that it needs acoustics costing around 500, 600,000. And you definitely won't go wrong if you pair this device with your floor-standing speakers of a similar class. There are also no questions about the VIM application. Ease of use is at its maximum. Overall, the setup is a must-have. Now, I always recommend it in a budget up to 250,000, definitely connecting via balance. And of course, my favorite color is this white on the dials, which I already consider to be the signature Premiere color. The fact that they added 2 more colors just for the sake of it, well, to be honest, I don't like them. For example, the green one, it's not Mac-like at all. And the orange, it seems to me, somehow gives off a pinkish hue. But this is definitely not for hardcore audiophiles. They should have added a specific yellow, like for example, Aku's, Kenisha, or a blue, a truly honest blue, like Laxman's. Then it would have been a super choice. But these 2 colors, well, just wow. I would also remove this white inscription, which I think doesn't match the appearance. And of course, the Premiere badge should also be removed. That's enough. And then we would have a super stylish and trendy device. At the same time, it's a very cool solution. Again, I keep looking at it and my attention is drawn to this little comb. It's just a bomb. What can I say? I have nothing more to criticize it for. I really tried to find more drawbacks, but nothing comes to mind. Spent so much time with it, and there's nothing more to criticize. So, no. By the way, if you want to buy it at a special price, contact my private Telegram, Why Private, Open Telegram channel. We post cool news there. I select systems at very great prices, and I'll do everything in the best way as always. Moreover, I'll build you a home theater, set up sound for a bar, restaurant, or cafe. Anything related to visualization and sound, that's my specialty.